Well done, Nadine. Really smashed the old order all the self-help books in the world but never actually read them technique. Genius. Probably would have helped with next week's presentation. Learning courses on LinkedIn. Might be useful. Okay, Mrs. Presenter. Tell me your secrets.
It's super important to do your audience research.
Hello everyone. Welcome to the third and final session of How to Reboot Your Career in Midlife in association with LinkedIn. My name is Victoria Lambert and I'm the Senior Commissioning Editor at the Telegraph. This session is help. I'm having a midlife employment crisis, and so over the next 45 minutes I will be talking to a selection of experts who can give you practical advice on alternative careers, training, repackaging your skills for midlifers. I would now like to welcome my first guest, which is Marina Gask. After a long-standing career as a journalist, blogger, and entrepreneur, Marina recently co-launched Audrey Online, a digital platform for Generation Restart, i.e. midlife women who want to reinvent and give their lives a reboot. There she is, or will be soon. Hello, Marina.
Hello.
And also joining me for tonight's session is Phill Westcott. Phill is the Director of Staffing Business at Walters People London, and has over 18 years of recruitment experience working with some of the leading media, property and professional services businesses across the capital. So, hello, Phill.
Good evening, everyone.
Well done. Welcome, everyone. We're going to start with some questions to begin with about ageism, because we're talking about midlife here. So presumably all of us, most of us, are somewhere in the bracket of midlife. And I think the really big first question is ageism still a big danger? At what stage are you too old? When do you call it a day from changing careers? Or is any time okay? So Phill, shall I come to you first with that?
Yeah, great, thank you. Do I believe that it's still a thing? Yes, I guess it probably is, realistically. Do I think that businesses, employers have done a lot to tackle exactly that subject? I also think that's true as well. So I think it's far less of a problem. And this is going to sound like a terrible cliche, but it is just a number. I am 40 this year. I am smack bang in the middle of what we're talking about here. But I don't think it's as much of a problem. I think it's more in people's heads, especially if people are looking to change careers. There are certain challenges that come with that, of course. But I think employers have done a lot to realise the potential of all sorts of different people for different potential prejudices, whether that's age, disability, gender, sexual orientation, all those sorts of things. So I don't think it's as much of a problem as people maybe have made up in their own mind, potentially.
Okay. Well, Marina, what if you're heading at the end of your 50s? Is that too late?
It depends on what sector you're in and how flexible you're prepared to be. So I recently interviewed Andrew Middleton from I'm Not Done Yet, and his advice, which is a platform for people who want to reinvent post 50, and he said there's the dangerous decade, which really starts in your late 50s, where you just do not get interviews, and yes, you are a victim of ageism. I can't pretend this isn't true. And running Audrey, where we have a membership club, a lot of the women that join Audrey talk about the ageism that they've experienced in the workplace and how they've been made to feel their face doesn't fit, pushed out, made redundant, etc., etc. But I also think Phill is right. There is a lot around mindset, and I think when you've been made to feel your face doesn't fit, it has a terrible effect on your confidence. And so it means that your self-belief is affected. And that means that when you go for jobs or retrain or try to repackage yourself, you don't do it with the confidence that you need. And so I think there's a lot of work for people in this position to be done around self-belief and confidence.
I think that's interesting because so one of our other readers has said, I'm in my 50s, I have skills, but I feel like they're not being used. Do you think there's a tendency for that overlooking to happen on all sides?
Yeah, I think there probably is, and it's so sad to hear that, isn't it? That someone's got so much to offer, and feels like they're not being able to add that value or contribute, and so on and so forth. And again, this might sound fairly obvious, but I think that people are somewhat apprehensive to approach this issue with their employer. Not necessarily about, I'm a certain age and you don't care about my career, nothing that drastic, but open up a dialogue with your employer, your line manager, your HR department, to say, look, I feel like I can offer more here. What options are available to me? Am I being made aware of all the internal opportunities here that can use my skills, and take some practical steps that way? I'm not saying that's the answer, because of course there is no right and wrong answer to any of this that we're talking about. But I think that approach, sometimes people are too apprehensive for, and I think they've got to open up to the people that they work with to see how they can contribute more, especially for their current employer. Because no one, it's dreadful to think that someone can offer so much more and is not able to do that, or feel able to do that.
The next question that comes up actually also ties into this. It's how important are qualifications when you're aged 40? And should I be striving to up-qual, get more certificates, even after 40? I mean, what do you think, Marina?
I can't really speak for qualifications. That's not really my area, but I think it's important to think of it in terms of skills, rather than qualifications. And I think it's really important to keep updating your skill set, to keep broadening out, to keep learning new things, and getting new experiences as well. And that's not just in the workplace, it's outside of the workplace as well. So valuable experience outside of the workplace would be working for a voluntary organisation. It would be, being on the PTA, those kind of extra occupations that add to your skill set and give you extra value in the workplace. I think that's really important. But also, I think it's so important to see your CV in terms of your skills, rather than a particular role that you're suited to.
That's interesting, because Kate Perkins has just popped up in the chat box and said she was told to take the date of birth off her CV and she's only 39. I mean, that's insane, isn't it?
I would suggest that that's not because Katie's 39 and therefore that would mean that she wouldn't be appropriate as an employee. I think that taking maybe ethnicity, age, and so on and so forth off a CV become a thing quite some time ago. Certainly from you speak from a recruitment agency perspective, of course, because it gives no unconscious bias that way. That someone is of a certain age. I mean, of course, if you really wanted to work it out, you could look at someone's education dates and so on and so forth. But that became a thing quite some time ago. So it might not be because Katie's 39. It's just that is the appropriate way now to apply for a job.
So that's really interesting, because it's years since I've had to do a CV. So if I was to put my CV out there now, Phill, you would tell me to take my date of birth off, my ethnicity. What else do you not want to see, or it just isn't standard to see?
When it comes to us representing as a recruitment business, again, going back to that point, and I don't have experience of all of the situations that someone would experience looking for a job, of course, but as a recruitment business or a recruitment partner to organisations, we try and share as little personal information as possible, because we want the selection process to be based on someone's accomplishments and someone's skills. We don't want it to be based on their name or where they grew up, or obviously levels of education are important, of course they are, because that frames and shapes someone's career and education and their journey in life and so on and so forth. But we want to share as little personal information so that the selection process is based on someone's ability to do the job and what they have achieved in their career so far.
Okay. I think it's really interesting, because even that's one of the things about being older, isn't it? Is that even things like CVs change. It's not just the job world that changes; the approaches change.
Absolutely.
I mean, and there's another really interesting question, which I think is that if we go to get a job and the job market is flooded with the younger generation who are perhaps cheaper, they may be less able to negotiate. So how do we get a new job without selling ourselves short? How do we say, look, I am 40, I'm going to ask for more money than a 23-year-old, but I'm worth it? How can you tackle that sort of area? I mean, Marina, is that something you could?
Yeah, I think it's really important to think about what you're going to bring that perhaps those younger people might not be able to bring. because you have that experience, because you have that confidence, because you may have worked in a variety of sectors or in a variety of roles, you're going to be bringing a wealth of experience that those people may not have. And so I think rather than looking at them and thinking they're my competition, they're young and cheap, you have to think, well, I'm their competition and I'm older and really experienced and really, really good.
Yeah. So it's a bit about self-confidence, and it's also about running your own race.
Yeah, I would say so.
I couldn't agree more with that. I mean, I think there's a few things there. I think graduates now, the change in education at university level with increased in tuition fees and all that sort of thing, I don't think that graduates with what they offer, practical experience, are actually as cheap as what the perception is. Actually, I think they're quite demanding of what they want out of their first job, and all of the ancillary things that come with looking for a job if you're a graduate, the rapid progression, the all of the different flexible benefits that millennials and so on and so forth are wanting out of their careers. So I think if you're 50 and you've got lots of skills, I would see that as a real bonus. I don't think it just comes down to money, because I think certainly what we're seeing at the moment, we are in a skills short market. From a recruitment perspective, it's busier in the last 3 months, and I only see a very small facet of the market, of course, in what I do. It's busier now than it has been probably for 4 years pre-COVID. And there's a lot of pent-up aggression for recruitment at the moment because people have put it on hold and people haven't done it and so on and so forth. But it's a real opportunity for people now to be able to go out there and really showcase what they can offer, genuine skills and experience and words of wisdom and all the war stories and so on and so forth that someone with experience can bring to an organisation. I think it's a real opportunity.
I'm going to stop you there for this because I've noticed we've got a lovely question here from Maxwell Peter Gower, who says, where does one go if you have a long history of general advisory work and general management experience and you're looking for your work in your 60s? In the old days, you'd send your CV to the agencies and the headhunters, but that no longer works. And unless you can give them the narrow skill set, recruiters can't identify how to fit you in. Phill, what do you think we should tell Maxwell about that?
I think there's a lot of truth in what Maxwell says there, actually. I think generally recruiters, and of course I'm tarring everyone with the same brush here, but I think recruiters, unless you've got your direction and you've got almost your own plan of where your career is and wants to be and your own aspirations, sometimes it is difficult for them to pinpoint how they can assist you with your search. They are introducers of talent and people to organizations. What they aren't necessarily is career coaches. And that's the likelihood for a lot of recruitment agencies, especially with younger, less experienced people. So I think there is some truth in that. I think unless you've got direction, sometimes recruiters can falter in terms of where they can position your skills. I think to the point of being 60 and having a history in general advisory, some of the advice that I would give is maybe look at contracting and freelance work, because I think that those types of jobs is where organizations want heavy hitting experience and quickly. They need problem solvers. So maybe some of the more permanent orientated work, if that's not coming off, is not getting enough of a response from recruiters, then look at your network, which of course will be fairly substantial, being, having worked for say 40 years, for example, and leverage that to maybe get some freelance and some project type work. That might be an angle to consider. Just an idea.
That's really interesting, because also, I mean, the other thing, and Marina, I'm just going to put this to you, is that one of the things people really worry about when they're older, coming into a new work environment, is how do you fit in with all the younger colleagues, and how do you make that transition? Because we all feel still 21 in our heads, but for 21-year-old meters, that's not really how they see us. And so, how do you get that kind of nice meshing that really makes you work well in an office?
That's a good question. I mean, I think if you go in with the mindset that you're not going to fit in, you're not going to fit in. So I'd say it's really important to do what it takes to make you feel better about yourself, whether that's, get your hair cut, get some new clothes, put on your best self. But I think also just remember that you are going in with you know, with a wealth of experience that's valuable. You can't go in with this mindset that you're, oh, I'm really old. Oh, that's really embarrassing. If you apologize for being old or make jokes about it, I think that's quite a common thing, is to make jokes about being the oldest one in the room. Then you're, you know, you're really telling people how to treat you, and that's really not good. I think another point to make is it's really, really important as well to be open-minded. I was working for a company a couple of years ago where I was interviewing people in their 50s who were saying, oh, I'm not interested in learning new skills. This is what I do. I do this, I don't do that. And I think that that kind of attitude is not going to get you very far in a younger workplace. You know, there needs to be a real openness to constantly upskilling and, you know, and rebooting your skill set so that you can compete. Yeah.
I think we're going to carry on talking some questions now around approach rather than specifically aging, because people have general questions around approaching specific areas. And one of the ones that I think is really interesting is, how can you effectively describe the skills you've acquired and developed, making them desirable to employers in new fields? Our reader says they're currently a teacher with almost 2 decades in the job, but they want to leave that profession and enter the real world. So how do you take those skills and turn them into something you can sell?
I would say, oh, sorry, Phil.
No, go.
Absolutely.
I would say spend some time on LinkedIn. I mean, if you're a teacher and you want to move into a different sector, but you're not sure what, then Google professions that teachers move into to get some ideas.
That's clever.
But then also spend some time on LinkedIn and look at how people who work in the sector that interests you, or sectors interest you, look at how they describe the work that they do, how they repackage those skills. It's really interesting once you start to do this, because the language around self-reinvention there's an art to it, most definitely, to working out how to sell what you do and how to repackage it in an appealing way.
Phill, I'm going to put the next one straight to you, which is another reader says, mid-career, no interviewing years, at risk of redundancy, apart from a good CV, how does one best prepare and get advice on being noticed by employers instead of being written off? So I think that follows from that question.
Yeah, it's a good question, and I think it's a starting point for a lot of people when looking for a change, or if they've been in employment with one particular employer for a long time and suddenly they find themselves on the open market. There's a couple of things. One thing that we will drop in, and someone's asked about links and helpful links and so on, and we should drop in there on our website. We've got a career toolkit, which kind of covers actually a great deal of this stuff, all the way from, you know, writing a CV if you haven't done for a while, how to make it pop, I think someone else's phrase was. Yeah. You know, tailoring it to particular employers or skill sets, planning for your interview, uncovering your next role, leveraging LinkedIn, exactly as Marina said. You know, interview prep and how to go about that. It's a really comprehensive toolkit. So we'll drop the link in there, and please do request that, and it will get sent to you automatically. And you know, maybe I can pick that up with job seekers if need be. But to answer your question, I think the how to prepare for an interview is something you need to take some specialist advice on. What I would say is, people again are apprehensive. I get people that ask me all the time, because I work in recruitment, can you find me a job? Okay, I'm a gas engineer. Well, I recruit accountants and various other things, so I probably can't help you find another job. What I would do is I wouldn't be apprehensive to call an old schoolmate or a soccer buddy or someone who used to play golf with or something who might be connected to that industry, or might know someone whose brother-in-law is a gas engineer, and actually reach out and ask for some advice. And I think that people maybe in their 40s or 50s or whatever we're talking about, a midlife zone, a bit too proud to do that. And I think you gain an enormous amount of insight into actually doing that job if you are moving into a different sector or a different job. What it's actually like to apply for a job if you haven't done for a while in that particular sector. So I think you've got to leverage all the tools at your disposal. LinkedIn was a great example for Marina.
Oh, I think we've lost.
They're all important.
Yeah, I think it's there's some really interesting comments, by the way, coming in down the side. I'm looking at I'm loving Robert, who said many companies I've worked for have had no one over 40 in them. I used to wonder where they all went. Well, yeah, obviously that's it's just awful, isn't it? But other people are saying non-executive directorships, and you can find them on LinkedIn, going to charity roles. And I think those are the sort of things you were talking about earlier, Marina, you can pick up, can't you? You can, I mean, even if you join your parish council, it's
yeah, absolutely. I think just looking for opportunities to just broaden out your skill set, your areas of interest, what you can bring to a role.
I mean, somebody said to me that, if you had a teenager saying, I want to get into whatever, you'd move heaven and earth, wouldn't you, to find them this little niche and that friend and who can tell you about this. And we don't do it for ourselves, though. We seem to find that hard.
That's really true. And that's why it's really important, I think, if you are going through this process, to try and find a group, a forum, a club, to be around people going through the same process, because I think it can be immensely lonely, that you've got so many questions, you want someone to bounce ideas around with. So I think that would be a top recommendation for anyone going through job search, but also who is thinking about becoming self-employed, who is thinking about starting a business. It's hard and it can be lonely, but it really helps, I think, if you have support from people going on the same journey.
Yeah, absolutely agree.
I think we all just need to ask for help from time to time. I think we all need to potentially be a little bit less proud and reach out to a network and ask for advice. And those things are so important. They can be so useful. It can be so useful, especially if you're looking at different industry or a different career altogether. Can be extremely valuable rather than relying on applying to. There was a question or a comment in the chats about applying to jobs online and so on and so forth. And that is the new world of how people look for work. But to give you an idea, for a mid-level role, nondescript, so that we don't need to go into details, we would have 800 applications in 24 hours for that job. It's impossible for us to be able to go back to 800 applications. We'd never find anyone a job because we'd be looking at lots of CVs all the time. So we have to be extremely, as a recruitment agency, selective. And that means that some people don't get a call, which is awful, but there is no other way of working it. An introduction, a network, those sorts of things are going to be extremely useful because they're far more direct and tailored in approach.
Yeah. Paul Sherrington's asked a question, and he says, do we have any advice for someone who is not fulfilled in their current job, but just doesn't know what else they can do? And that, I think, kind of turns out there's another question we've already been sent, which is, how can you identify new career avenues for work-life balance? So how do you do that? You're in a job, you've got security for whatever that is, but you're desperate for the exit sign. Marina, where do we look?
I think the first thing really is to try and work out what your values are and what you love to do. So, if you love helping people, or you love solving problems, or you love being in charge, or whatever it is, what is it that actually makes you feel good, in a work environment? Go back through your CV, go back through all the jobs you've had and think, when was I happiest? Which role made me feel the most fulfilled? And try and reconnect with that, and reconnect with what it was that made you feel that good, and try from there to work out what you have since learnt, the skills that you've accumulated, how you can turn that into a new role. I mean, I'm talking as someone who was made redundant 15 years ago, so I was in my mid-40s. I know how it feels to lose your job and to have to reinvent yourself. And I've actually had to do it a number of times since then. It's hard. It is hard, but it's immensely rewarding. And in many cases, I would say doing that is better than trying to bang on the door of companies that possibly don't want to employ you. Finding your own way, finding your own route, and redefining your career for yourself is immensely rewarding. It's not for everyone, I'm sure, but it is worth considering.
How do you, Phill, here's another one. How do you work out if your much loved hobby could be turned into a new career?
Well, my hobby is golf, and I'd love to have that as a career. I know it's not good enough, unfortunately, for it to be a career. But it's very similar to what Marina just said. You know, it's connecting with something that makes you happy. I think everyone would probably agree that something they enjoy doing as a hobby, turning that into a career, is the dream, right? A youngster growing up and wanting to be a footballer, or whether that's, you know, someone who wants to be a physician and help people, you know, all sorts of different manners. I mean, I can't really answer any better than what Marina already did, but I think it's about connecting with something and again, seeking advice, looking at, there is so much availability of information for people, and there will be somewhere a dentist that decided that he wanted to be a rugby player, or a physician that decided she wanted to work as an NED in a charity, an international charity, for example. There will be similar examples. It's uncovering that information. The good news is that all of that stuff is so available with, you know, with a little bit of research, a little bit of time committed and a bit of determination, you can find that and connect with those people. People want to offer advice, whether it's the normal average Joe that's gone through that, the person himself, and you reach out to them. 9 times in 10, they will open up a conversation with you. I think we all just need, as a society, to be more connected and more trusting and open with each other. That really helps when it comes to career and making big decisions in your life. Yeah,
I think that's just so true. When shouldn't you change your careers? This is a great question, I think. So it was a pre-submitted question. When not to change careers, even if you think you want or should to. So when is the right time to stay put? Phil, what do you think?
That's a tough one, because I think a lot of that is very personal in terms of your own personal situation. I certainly don't think it's age. I certainly don't think it's that. I think you've got to be very committed. You've got to do due diligence, and you've got to be personally in the right situation to change jobs, for obvious reasons, financial and all that sort of stuff. You know, if you're going to retrain, if you're going to learn new things, then that balance, if you've got a young family, for example, or you're a carer, those things are going to make a difference. So I can't really tell people when's not the right time to do the job, to change careers or retrain. At the moment, there is, if you look at a skill short market, it potentially is a good time to do that, as long as you've got time to be able to commit to what that looks like, because you're not going to apply for a job in a completely different industry and find a job in a week, like you probably could do in your current skill set. So you've got to stick with it. You've got to be resilient to that process. It's probably the only advice that I can offer.
Marina, do you have anything to add to that one?
I do. I would say if the career you're aiming for is one for which there is not high demand, so that's something that you need to find out before you move into that area. I'd say it's really important to have a financial buffer. So if if your finances are in dire straits, it's probably not a good idea to be thinking about changing careers, but maybe planning to at some point, when things are better. And I would also say, I think a lot of people make this mistake of spending an absolute fortune on retraining, but haven't really done their research. And a really good idea, if you're in this position, is to dabble in the new career. And when I say dabble, I mean, do some research, see if you can get some kind of, work experience, or shadow someone, or do some voluntary work that gives you some relevant experience. But don't just throw loads of money at it and then discover actually it doesn't suit me, or I can't get a job, or it's making me miserable, because that would be a tragedy.
It's really easy to get disheartened, isn't it? It's very easy to lose esteem and confidence quite quickly. There was one question that just popped up, actually. I think it was from Robert, and Darren actually pretty much answered it for me. But the question was, how do you whittle down? I think I mentioned about 800 applications in 24 hours. How do you whittle those down? As a recruiter, it's impossible. There is no way on earth, anyone that works for me, you'd have to be superhuman to be able to do that for 20 jobs that you're managing in a portfolio. For a customer. To answer your question, a lot of it is tech related, Robert. So the technology platform that receives applications and manages them from all the different sites that might be advertised on, whether that's LinkedIn or your own site or a CV library or whatever it might be. They use algorithms to look at your CV and work out whether you are how you rank in terms of suitability for that role. So it really does take actually the personal touch from that, but it is the only way to be able to get back to the right people that have the right skills. Maybe not the answer that you want to hear, but that's the honest truth.
Well, I think this is really helpful because there's a very interesting comment that's popped up from Grace. Now, Grace is very worried that this is all very middle class, and we are the Telegraph. I'm just going to put that out there. This is very middle class, and that there are no opportunities for normal people because people, the upper crust, stick together and keep the good jobs for themselves. Now, I think, Phill, you've just pointed out that's not possible.
No.
Because your algorithms aren't looking at who knows who, are they?
No. When people are applying for a job, that algorithm has no prejudice. It is looking for keywords. It is looking for skills. It is looking for the things that I describe in a job description, for example. It matches those to what's on someone's CV. I mean, there are only so many things that you can actually ask for, of course, in a job advert. I can't say you must be a certain age or you must be degree educated, or because of those things would be an unconscious bias. They would be prejudicial. So they're very broad anyway. So your CV should match the best skills. That doesn't necessarily help people who are trying to change careers because they may not have those skills. And that's why possibly using an own network rather than maybe a recruitment agency, for example, it might be the better way to go, because that is probably going to serve its purpose better than, a specific niche recruiter or headhunter or, whatever. The other thing that I would mention real quick is that we recently released a pretty substantial diversity and inclusion report, an analysis report. It's about 7,500 people contributed, so it's quite a large, substantial report. We can drop that in the comments. Please request a copy of that. Ageism is a big section in that, as well as all the other sections that you would expect. Big partners, JP Morgan, Co-op, big businesses that have shared their own strategies, so you can get an insight for what they do in their organization and how they approach this type of thing, age being one of them. So I would maybe have a look at that. It's a pretty big document, it's about 80 pages or something, but it's worth a look. And what you will find, the common theme here is the big organizations have been working so tirelessly on D&I over the last number of years, but certainly in the last couple of years, it's increased in capacity and investment. And you'll find that lots of them are looking at returners to work, whether that's ex-military vets, ex-offenders, whether that's people that have been out of work for a period of time. There's all sorts of different things that those organizations are doing, and they might be a good place to start to get some advice. Especially if you're changing careers. Say a teacher, for example, was the one earlier that maybe wants to be an event organizer. Those are the sorts of businesses, rather than a local mid-sized privately owned business. Those are the ones that I would probably look at for. And then once you've got that skills, then you can maybe transfer that into a mid-sized business where you've got more of a say, let's say.
Yeah. One of my favorite pre-submitted questions, I've got to do this one, is my CV reads like a bad book. How can I streamline it? Marina, how can we improve our CV that reads like a bad book?
Well, I think somebody made the comment earlier that you're only meant to include the last 10 years of your career. I think the most important thing is don't feel like you have to put everything you've ever done down on your CV. It's really, really important not to overwhelm people with information, but also you can hide how old you are if you want to, by not mentioning all those early roles that you had, in the 1980s, 1990s, etc. I think it's really, really important to think in terms of skills. Each time you're talking about a role, you're talking about the skills that you learned, the way that you improved on your CV through that role, the results that you got, the money you saved your company, or etc. I'm going to pass over now because CVs are probably not my strongest point, but that's what I would say.
Yeah, I think that there's a couple of bits here. I would focus on accomplishments and achievements much more than I would general duties and responsibilities, because they become quite generic. You have to tailor your application or your CV to each job. It is vitally important that you do that. Too many people get into a cycle where they are maybe not getting responses, or they're sort of having a bit of a scattergun approach for whatever reason, and I do understand that. But what happens is they've got a prefix CV that they applying for jobs through their phone, for example, and they send 25 applications a day to all and sundry type work. Unfortunately, that's not going to do you any favors. In fact, it probably has a detrimental effect. So you need to spend a little bit of time identifying the right job and tailoring what you can do transferably to that job. That is going to make the difference. And I know that's time consuming and so on and so forth. But if you're identifying a career path that you want to take, a different skill set, different type of channel, then you do need to commit the time and be determined to be able to represent yourself in the right way. But focus on achievements, focus on accomplishments, statistically as well as anecdotally. That will make a big difference. And a cover letter never goes, and it's possibly a bit old school, but a cover letter describing how you can transfer your skills if you're retraining for a new career is often quite useful, in my opinion.
Yeah. I'm just picking up a question here from Roz, who said, please can you answer the question about in-demand roles if we're thinking about changing careers, especially if you're not interested in digital or pure computer roles. So where do we think the jobs are at the moment if you're not if you're not comfortable with digital or that's not your world? Are there any areas that either of you have seen that there really seems to be some space at the moment?
So, social care and teaching, I know there's a lot of demand in those areas.
And social care doesn't necessarily mean that you're the carer. Doesn't necessarily, I mean, obviously they do need carers, but you might be the administrator, or there are lots of other, the marketeer,
Exactly. And I believe in web design, there's a lot of demand as well. I was just looking before we came on air. There's a lot of demand in web design. I mean, I think there's probably a lot of demand in web design because lots of people are becoming entrepreneurs. And
yes,
so they need websites. So there's a lot of demand for copywriters, for marketers, for web design, because of all these people. That's the thing is, look at what people are moving into and service them, service their needs. And if they need help with their social media, their marketing, their websites, their copywriting, etc., that's where there's a huge amount of demand right now.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think it's more industry than it is necessarily skills. There's lots of information available at what skills are in demand. That could be a dentist, it could be a bricklayer, it could be a number of different things. If you want to focus on that and train for a particular skill, absolutely. But I would say that you're right. Look at the industries. Technology is a huge boom. FinTech, anything tech related in education, financial, tech, banking, and all that sort of thing, money transfer, those are really, really busy markets. Anything e-commerce related, it kind of comes back to the point with it's computer based, it's technology, but all those businesses need a front of house secretary, they need an events organizer, they need an administrator, they need an office manager, they need a salesperson, they need all of those things to make the operation work. You don't have to be a software developer to work for a fintech business. You can be the in-house caterer. They need those too. So it's identifying the industries that have got the biggest boom at the moment. And in my opinion, anything e-commerce or tech related is really the where it's at.
But you don't have to be the digital person within the organisation.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
I mean, this is quite interesting because somebody else has asked already, what about retraining? That no one's going to bother retraining me, but that's not true either, is it? Because there are some areas where everybody's having to be trained.
Yes, I think there's a lot of investment for businesses into learning and development, whether that's external skills learning. I often have people in an organisation come to me and say, I want to, it might be very simple, but I want to upskill in my presentation skills. And we'll go and seek some advice and find out if there's something that we can offer. I think businesses are very open to that at the moment. And if you are in a job and you want to learn some new skills, why not use your current employer, where you have been for, let's say, a few years, to help invest in that training, to help you learn something new. It should only benefit that organisation ultimately. And most of this training isn't as expensive as, maybe what people think. It doesn't cost 50 grand to learn how to be a PowerPoint expert, or to see a career coach and understand better about presentation, face-to-face skills, whatever it might be. It's not as expensive as it often seems. So yes, there is a lot available, and companies are probably more now than ever interested in retaining talent and retaining retention of individuals, and retraining is more of an option. That's what I see personally.
Yeah. One of the things, Marina, one of the things that we've been also asked about is that somebody said they'd had long COVID and they cannot go back to their old career because of that. You know, do you think employees are going to be open to people saying, well, I've had a bad time with COVID in the last year. Is it worth being upfront about it and saying, you know, this is where we are?
I mean, yes, because I think, you know, most of us have been hit by COVID in some way. So I think, you know, people are hardly going to be judgmental or negative about that. But I think it's also about being positive about what you are bringing, you know, to the table, you know, and of course working online if that's necessary because of the symptoms. There are so many options for working online. There are so many courses. There's two companies called Digital, if it's a woman, Digital Mums and Tech Pixies, where you can learn very specific digital skills that you can use, you know, without actually ever meeting. I mean, this is the thing. People now work for individuals and companies without ever meeting them. I do it all the time. You know, that's the majority of my work is done entirely remotely, and that's how people, you know, obviously that's how people are working now. So you know, I think it's about bringing, you know, bringing something interesting to the company. You know, bringing interesting skills or interesting ideas, rather than feeling limited by you know, the negative experience. And it's hard, I know, if you've been through a long-term negative experience, to build your confidence back up. And I think it's really, really important to talk to the people that you've worked with in your favorite jobs and get reminded of what it is that you're good at and what value it is that you bring to an organization.
I noticed that time is really already almost upon us. So, but before we do anything, it goes so fast, doesn't it? I'd like to ask you both for what your really top tip is, and whether that's, you know, a specific tip towards attitude, or whether there's a great book that everybody should read, or anything that you kind of think. Phill, have you got any kind of top tips that you like to share with people in midlife?
I would just say, be more confident. Use your network. Applying for heaps of jobs online and not getting a response doesn't mean that you can't offer value or that there isn't a job there for you. I think people fall into this perpetual cycle of apply for thousands of jobs and we don't get one, so therefore we're useless and no one wants to employ us. It's not the case. Use your network. Do a bit more due diligence. And when writing your CV, always focus on the transferable skills that you have as a teacher in order to be an accountant, as an example. There will be transferable skills. There are transferable skills for everything that you do in your job that is a completely different career path. Identify them, talk to people, network, get advice, make sure that goes, and that's how you focus in applying for that job.
Thank you. And what about you, Marina? Have you got a go-to?
I mean, I just think there's absolutely loads of us out there. So I think, you know, get some solidarity. You know, find people going through the same journey. Get support. There's lots of free courses. There's companies like idea.org.uk, and Restless as well is a great company for finding jobs, for courses. There's communities like Advantages of Age. There's my own community, Audrey. You know, there's so many places to get solidarity and also share ideas. So don't sit at home thinking, you know, you're on your own. You're not.
Thank you, both of you, very much. It's been really, really helpful. And thanks to everyone at home who's been watching and joining in. And I hope you've gained some benefit from what we've had to say. And this now concludes our How to Reboot Your Career in Midlife series. We hope you found the sessions useful and constructive, and have lots of practical steps now. So thanks, everyone, very, very much. And good night.
Thank you very much.